Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today I want to go over some of the possible scenarios around the upcoming merge hard fork. Now we've successfully completed that final transition on testnet and we're due to go on mainnet in mid-September. I'm not going to go over all the details on what it means to actually be finally making the transition to proof of stake. I've done plenty of videos of that in the past, and it's crazy to think that the time has finally arrived. It's been many years we've been talking about how this is going to happen and how eventually it's going to help ETH scale and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people weren't bullish on ETH in the past and talking about why other chains were better, and a lot of other chains have come and gone. But I think this is really the final big step for Ethereum to allow that blossoming of Web3 and mass adoption and real world use. So let's talk about history, see what we can learn from that with some of these other hard forks that were definitely more contentious than this one, but we'll talk about how that game theory might play out and some things to be aware of. So this was the Ethereum Classic ETH hard fork, and at the time there was a lot of popularity trying to be drummed up on social media, and Poloniex listed it, which was like the Binance at the time, the most popular altcoin exchange. And we did have a couple of weeks up or even start trading at a 50-50 ratio. So that soon died down, and we're now sitting at around a 2% market cap value ratio to Ethereum. But even though there's not a lot of development activity or community on these fork chains, a lot of the time they do capture some of that value no matter what. And there's a lot of reasons you can argue for and against why that happens. But the fact that things like Ethereum Classic have still an $8 billion fully diluted market cap tells us that whenever there's a fork and there's some opportunity for profit to be made, some percentage of people, no matter how tiny, are going to try and push that narrative. In this case with Ethereum, it'll be the miners that want to stay on proof of work. But I'm going to talk about all the complications and why that might be different this time, but some of the things that are going to happen or could happen to be aware of, and even ways to profit from that. Bitcoin Cash was obviously the next one. Again, we had a week all the way up to 50-50 value with Bitcoin. Old subscribers will remember at that time, I actually did a live stream and talked about how this was a great opportunity to short Bitcoin Cash and how it wasn't the real Bitcoin and so on. And again, that's just trickled away to almost nothing, less than 1% of Bitcoin's value. But even at less than 1%, again, it's still got a fully diluted market cap of $3 billion for a range of reasons we won't go into. So now we've actually got some of these futures trading on the ETH proof of stake or ETH proof of work and the probabilities and the pricing of that. So we're seeing that the proof of stake ETH token that's been launched on Poloniex for you to trade now is trading at around 96%. So at the moment, the market, even though this isn't the most liquid market or doesn't have a lot of volume, it's telling us that there's about a 3 or 4% chance that the proof of work chain will survive, at least at that point in time. So that's one way to trade this already, depending on your beliefs. And some exchanges might not even list that other token, but some will. And at that time, you can theoretically get those two tokens. And then a lot of people are going to want to sell straight away the less popular version of ETH just to get more ETH or whatever. But also think about all the forked tokens that you might get, and are people going to want to sell them, and what does that lead to if there's fees to be accumulated? So they're the things I kind of want to dive into a little bit more today. So some of the theories we've got floating around at the moment is that the proof of work chain, where there's going to be some miners try and get together. And remember, a lot of this is going to get amplified on social media, crypto Twitter and whatnot, and for the people that are trying to trade and profit from this specifically. So they're going to try and improve the proof of work chain rather than just say, hey, it's just going to exist. We're also going to make some changes. And one of those is going to be that fee market change that was removed. So this is a way to get the miners that stay on there more fees and try and make it slightly more attractive. We've also heard about possibly diffusing the difficulty bomb or another chain that might try and do this. We might have another chain that says we're going to triple miner fees. So there's going to be a lot of different things you're going to hear on social media, whether or not they matter to you, but this is the stuff just to be prepared for. So when you hear it, you kind of understand what's going on and maybe the intent behind it or why they're pushing these messages. Let's have a look at all the total value locked in some of these different DeFi protocols. So if you think about all these different protocols, think about the effects if there's a forked version and all the liquidity in these different pools and having two versions of all those tokens, and what sort of tokens might actually have some value versus which ones aren't. And we might even see instances where something like Uniswap says, you know what, we're not going to bother with all these other tokens at all. And then a competitor, maybe something a lot smaller like SushiSwap, comes along and says, well, hold on, we're going to at least see if it survives. And if a lot of people are trading out of all these tokens, maybe there's some money to be made collecting all those fees. And then we can even dump that for the real Ethereum further on down the track. But these are the sort of game theoretic scenarios that might lead to some sort of volume and some sort of profiting, and why they might exist for at least a small period of time. Now, Vitalik's recently come out and spoken about how big and influential some of these stablecoins are. So something like USDC or Tether, these things that are centralized, if you have a forked version of that, that's obviously not going to be worth $1. It might have some sort of tiny value as people are just trading out of it or whatnot, but in theory, you can never redeem it for $1. It's centralized. It only exists on the true Ethereum chain. So things like this might not have any value. But as I said, if millions of dollars are going to try and get out of some of these other coins, maybe the forked version, the proof of work version of the Uniswap or Sushi token or whatever DEX is allowing people to get out, maybe capturing some of those fees does have some sort of value, at least for some period of time. So a few things to think about there. This is also really relevant with the recent news around Tornado Cash and those sanctions, about just how influential some of these big tokens that have grown to huge market caps, they have a big say in what can happen in the future of Ethereum. Now, if you're a true proponent of decentralization, as I've always been, you should be aware of these issues as well, and how the threat that it presents to the Ethereum and the whole crypto ecosystem. You know, this news was pretty bad, and I still don't think the market's truly digested it or realized the implications of this. And maybe because there's a lot of noise and excitement around the merge at the moment, and at some stage that'll die down and people will start to realize how bad this news is, that we now have the US sanctioning these protocols and some of the fallout from that. So for the time being, Circle with USDC, they have announced 100% support for the proof of stake chain. Tether soon followed thereafter. But think about anything that has a peg, really going to have basically a zero value, because it's not going to be redeemable from that centralized authority. So something like MakerDAO is really interesting, where we have DAI being backed by a huge proportion of ETH, but also backed by a huge proportion of USDC. So that's probably another video, and it's a discussion we've had in the group this week about the implications of this, and I've spoken at length about why I think DAI choosing to have such a large proportion of USDC backing it is a really, really bad thing. And we've only seen the past 24 hours of finally having these discussions around whether or not Maker should get rid of a lot of that USDC backing it and go for that ETH model as well. So there are a few other interesting things to have a good think about at the moment. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is NFTs and forked versions of NFTs. So if you have a Bored Ape on the true Ethereum chain, you're now going to have another ape on the old proof of work chain. Again, this is a reason why some people are going to say, well, what is that worth? What makes these things worth anything in the first place? It's kind of that collector value, the community behind it, and so on. So in theory, can some people decide whether or not an ape as a part of history has some value on the old proof of work chain, and is that a part of history? And the fees collected from that, does that mean there's going to be some sort of activity on the old proof of work chain? So I think you kind of see where I'm going with all this. I mean, even some of these left-facing copycats, these flipped apes or whatever you call them, you know, why do they have value? Why do some people want to buy these? And that same sort of sentiment and herd psychology, as soon as a few people start to hear about on Twitter, well, someone's buying these versions on the old proof of work chain, is there going to be some sort of rush into those or out of those, and so on there? So another game theoretic scenario to be aware of. Now, some people have proposed that replay attacks will be possible on that new chain, and look, I don't think this is actually likely, but let's just say you've got that NFT in your Ethereum address, and you are trying to flip it quickly, on the proof of work chain, just to get rid of it quickly and dump it for some more real ETH. Can that transaction be replayed on the proof of stake chain? So look, I think there's a really low chance of that happening, but if you are worried about that, what you could do in theory is end any sales that you currently have, auctions or whatever, on Ethereum at the moment for your NFTs, and then move those to a new address after the fork. And that kind of breaks the chain, pardon the pun, if someone was to be able to do a replay attack. But again, I don't think that's really likely. Just something that's been proposed on crypto Twitter that I wanted to mention. Some other ways that you can play this to profit. So some of these options, let's say that it's even just that gap that we're currently trading at, which is, let's call it 4%. If some of these options markets and futures markets aren't taking that into account, or exchanges aren't giving you both tokens, even that 4% can be a profitable trade for someone that's using a bit of leverage, or someone that's using a large amount of money. And so that is the first way to play it. If you're an options head and you think there's going to be some sort of sell-off after the merge, the Ethereum price is going to drop 4% in regard to how these options were previously priced in a perfect world, you might want to think about buying some puts. They will also go up in price, all things remaining equal, if we get more fear and volatility as we get closer to that date. And maybe it's a sell the news event, as a lot of people are piling in to Ethereum thinking, hey, we're going to get 2 tokens and then we're going to dump one and buy more ETH after, or whatever. But if you think there's going to be more volatility around that time, you might be looking to buy some puts. That's one way to play it. The other probably more popular trade is going to be buying spot Ethereum, which is what we're seeing at the moment, and I just mentioned, and then selling those futures, because after that date happens, 4% drop in price, everything else remaining equal from how those futures markets are currently trading. Again, there's a gap, there's a differential, there's profit to be made. And that's why we're going to see a lot of noise around all this on crypto Twitter. So I guess it's just, in summary, I think we're going to continue to see a lot of hype. Some big names in the space, mainstream media, everyone's going to be talking about the merge and what it means. So we can probably say that there's going to be a lot of excitement heading into this, which is what crypto maybe needs at the moment, after people proposing bear market, inflation, we're going into recession, crypto can't do well. That's certainly something that hasn't happened in recent weeks. Again, I did that post outlining why I thought that dip under $1,000 for ETH was probably the bottom. It's been a pretty good 5 or 6 weeks now. We're still a month out to that actual date in mid-September when this is all going to go down. So I hope that's given you guys some things to think about. I'll detail some more specific strategies on possibly how to profit from this in the members group. If you are interested, guys, the links are down below. When you apply to join, I'll send you a message on the details on how to join. So please make sure you check your messages, your message requests, and your spam in case they get caught in there. So guys, that's it for today. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share these videos around, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers.